Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. In this video I want to talk about a topic that is really close to my heart, EA's greed. We all know EA is one of the biggest gaming companies in the world, but how much do they care about the welfare of their players? In this video, I'm going to show you the dark side of EA and discuss how their greed is affecting the gaming industry. Let's get right into it. Before we get into EA's greed, let's first take a quick look at the company itself. EA, or Electronic Arts, is a US video game developer and publisher headquartered in California. Founded in 1982, the company has since produced some of the most well-known and successful games, including The Sims, FIFA, Madden NFL and many more. However, EA also has some controversial business practices that worry their players and the gaming community in general. One example is Star Wars Battlefront 2, which caused an uproar upon its release in 2017 when it was revealed that the game had a pay-to-win strategy that allowed players to gain in-game advantages in exchange for real money. Another example is the upcoming game Battlefield 2042, which has also been criticized for its use of microtransactions and in-game purchases to maximize profits. Now that we know who EA is and what their business practices are, let's talk about how their greed affects the gaming industry. EA's greed has caused some controversy in recent years, and we're going to take a closer look at it. One issue is the use of loot boxes in games like Star Wars Battlefront 2. Loot boxes are virtual boxes that contain random rewards that can help players progress through the game. These loot boxes can be purchased for real money in some games, which means that players with more money can have an advantage over other players. EA was heavily criticized for the use of loot boxes in Battlefront 2, as it made the game a pay-to-win experience. Players were forced to spend real money to make the same progress in the game as those who had more money to spend. Another problem is the pre-order bonuses in games like Battlefield 2042. Pre-order bonuses are rewards that players receive when they purchase a game before its release. These rewards can give players advantages that other players don't have, which can make the game unfair. EA has used pre-order bonuses in the past to get players to buy the game early to make more money. These business practices show how EA's greed affects their games and how this can affect the player experience. Let's now take a closer look at how these business practices affect the gaming industry as a whole. EA's greed not only impacts the games themselves, but also the gaming community as a whole. One of the effects is the loss of players' trust in EA as a company. Through the use of business practices such as loot boxes and pre-order bonuses, many gamers feel that EA cares more about profits than the player experience. This has led to a loss of trust that can affect EA game sales. Another effect of EA's greed is the increase in cost to consumers. When loot boxes can be purchased for real money, it can become an expensive experience, especially for players who are addicted to the game. Pre-order bonuses can also cause players to spend more money to have the same advantage as other players. These additional costs can affect the player experience and make players less willing to invest in EA's games. Finally, the effects of EA's greed can extend to the gaming industry as a whole. If companies like EA try to squeeze more and more money out of their players, it could lead to a negative impact on the gaming industry. If gamers feel that they are being taken advantage of by companies, they will be less willing to invest in new games. This could lead to fewer games being produced, which in turn could lead to a decline in the gaming industry as a whole. So the implications of EA's greed are far-reaching and cannot be ignored. Let's now take a look at what the gaming community can do to combat these business practices. EA is certainly not the only gaming company guilty of greed. Other companies such as Activision Blizzard and 2K Games have used similar business practices to increase profits. However, some of these companies have begun to take action to address the problem of greed. Activision Blizzard, for example, has announced that it will rely less on microtransactions and loot boxes in the future. Instead, they will focus on selling DLCs and other content that provides real value to players. 2K Games has taken similar steps by reviewing its business practices to make sure they are fairer to consumers. There are other solutions to the problem of greed in the gaming industry. One way is for companies to be more transparent and tell players what they are getting for their money. This can help regain players' trust and encourage them to invest in the games. Another solution is for companies to offer fair prices to consumers. If consumers feel they are getting real value for the money they spend, they will be more willing to invest in the games. Companies could also consider alternative funding models, such as subscription services or crowdfunding, to fund their games. So there are several ways companies can address the problem of greed in the gaming industry. Although there is no perfect solution, these measures can help regain players' trust and create a better future for the gaming community. EA has received a lot of criticism for their business practices in recent years. One of the main criticisms is the use of microtransactions and in-game purchases to maximize profits. These practices can lead to players having unfair advantages over other players or being forced to spend more money to enjoy the game. Another criticism is the way EA markets their games. They often use aggressive advertising and pre-order bonuses to boost sales. This can make players feel like they have to buy the game to stay up to date, even if it hasn't been released yet. Another problem is that EA often launches games that aren't ready and then releases patches and updates later to fix the problems. This can make players feel like they are paying for an incomplete game, and it can also make the game not work as well as it should. There are also concerns about the way EA treats their customers. Some players have complained that they have difficulty contacting customer support or that they do not respond appropriately to their problems. Overall, there are many criticisms of EA and their business practices. While they are certainly not the only company guilty of greed, it is important that they rethink their practices and take action to regain players' trust. Meanwhile, the effects of EA's greed are not only impacting the gaming community, but the gaming industry as a whole. More and more companies are focusing on maximizing their profits instead of creating quality games and experiences for players. This trend has led to the creation of in-game purchases and microtransactions that can change the gaming experience and competition within the game. There is a growing concern in the gaming community that the industry is becoming more focused on maximizing profits and less focused on creating quality games that provide a great experience for players. This has also led to more and more gamers being skeptical when it comes to buying new games, fearing that they will be taken advantage of by companies. However, there are also positive examples of companies that are successfully trying to tackle greed in the gaming industry. Some companies have made transparency and fairness for consumers a priority and have minimized the use of microtransactions and in-game purchases. Such companies have gained great prestige in the gaming community, proving that it is possible to develop games while following ethical business practices. It is important that the gaming industry as a whole is scrutinized to ensure that companies follow ethical and fair business practices and ensure that players have a great experience. There are a growing number of voices in the gaming community calling for companies like EA to be more transparent and fair about their business practices. Some are calling for stricter regulations and laws to prevent the abuse of in-game purchases and microtransactions. Others suggest that companies should abandon profit maximization in favor of a greater focus on the quality of their games and the satisfaction of their players. The gaming community is also calling for greater involvement in game development decision-making and implementation of business practices. Some suggest that companies like EA should involve their players and fans more by involving them in the development of games and the design of in-game purchases and microtransactions. It is clear that the gaming community is showing a high level of dissatisfaction with the business practices of EA and other companies, and that there is an urgent need for change. The demands of the community are clear, and companies like EA need to take action to regain the trust of gamers and ensure that the gaming industry is fair and sustainable. In conclusion, the greed of EA and other companies is affecting the gaming community and the industry as a whole. By using controversial business practices like microtransactions and in-game purchases to maximize profits, companies like EA have lost the trust and satisfaction of gamers. The gaming community has raised calls for greater transparency and fair pricing for consumers to address the problem of greed. It is important for gamers to speak out and hold companies like EA accountable to bring positive change to the gaming industry. We should be aware of how our consumer behavior affects the industry and advocate for ethical business practices. Finally, I encourage you to like, comment, and subscribe to this video for more content and to continue the discussion. Together we can raise a voice against greed in the gaming industry and fight for fairer business practices and better gaming experiences. Thanks for watching and see you next time.